We're going to continue our exploration then of these latest developments in Iran by speaking to Simon Mabon, who is a professor of international politics at Lancaster University. Thank you very much for joining us today, Simon. So several Middle Eastern nations have expressed concern about these latest developments, and though some have participated in diplomacy efforts, be it in Gaza really or on Iran's nuclear program, they've perhaps struggled to make much of a difference. Do you think that these strikes on Iran will change anything?
I think what it does is it ratchets up the tensions, the anxieties, the fears, and the real deep sense of insecurity and anxiety that many are feeling across the region right now. We know that the US has got a very strong presence in the Middle East, particularly in the Persian Gulf. It's got bases in Bahrain, Qatar. It's got a strong presence in Saudi Arabia. So that is going to be a source of worry for many of those states who have got complex relations with Iran. I mean, Saudi Arabia has made a diplomatic breakthrough with the Iranians in the past couple of years. But even now, because it has this close relationship with the US, there are question marks as to whether that diplomatic breakthrough of 2023 is still valid. There are anxieties going to be increasing in Riyadh, in Doha, in Abu Dhabi, in Manama. It's going to be a really worrying time for people because nobody knows what the Iranians are going to do next, how they will respond, whether it sticks with Israel or whether they follow through on their promise to target U.S. bases and U.S. officials.
I mean, they're certainly in a rather stuck between a rock and a hard place, I think you could say, because if they do respond, they risk an even stronger response from Israel and now perhaps both the United States as well. But if they don't respond, they'll look even weaker than they already do appear on the international stage. So what do you think is the most likely response that we'll see from Tehran?
Yeah, that's the bind that the Islamic Republic finds itself in. And it's a bind that it's found itself in a number of times over the past 18 months or so. And in the past, we saw that the response was to have a symbolic, somewhat strategic targeting of sites in Israel. We saw the performative missile and drone strikes covering Israeli skies back in the past 9 months or so. But I think given what's happened now, the stakes have been raised so high that I'm not sure that that type of symbolic or indeed performative act would capture the needs of the Islamic Republic regime in the way that it did in the past. So without wanting to speculate too much, we don't know. We don't know. But I can't imagine that the Supreme Leader or indeed the hardliners in the Revolutionary Guard Corps will sit back and let this lie.
Prior to this war, Simon, Gulf nations had been pursuing a detente of sorts with Tehran after years of tense relations. This is something that you, of course, have followed closely in ongoing research and also in books that you've published. Whose side are they on now, do you think? And what do you make of the kind of evolution of that rivalry?
So, I mean, if we were to look at this question 3 or 4 years ago, you'd get a very different picture. You'd have got the Saudis on the opposite side to the Iranians. And it's less than 20 years ago that King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia urged the US to do exactly this. He called on the US to, and I'm quoting here, to cut off the head of the snake. So he wanted this type of strike against Iran to try and weaken its influence on the region and try and thwart its apparent nuclear aspirations. But what we've seen in recent years is a pragmatic turn under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, under the recent Iranian administrations. We've seen a general acceptance that the economy is perhaps the most important driving factor here. Particularly in Riyadh, we know that NEOM, Vision 2030, all of these grand schemes that have been floated by the Crown Prince can only come to fruition with regional stability. And that was what was driving the détente with Iran. That's what was driving the burgeoning rapprochement. And I think what we've seen with everything that's happened in Gaza, the destruction of Gaza, the killing of tens of thousands, if not more, in Gaza, and now the strikes on Iran, the exchange of missiles between Israel and Iran, and the strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities, it points to a region that is not stable, that is not quote unquote open for business, that will not be able to attract all of the foreign direct investment that is needed to enact these visions that are the dreams of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and indeed others. So I think it's a really worrying time for people. It's not just about the specter of war, but it's about the broader existential specter of what was going to become, what these states could have been in a more quiet, more calm, peaceful environment. Of course, the specter of war is looming large, and it's very, very worrying for a lot of people.
Simon, to piggyback off of a lot of really interesting things that you just said there, I mean, you talk about how some of these Gulf leaders have prioritized pragmatic economic considerations in their diplomatic dealings over the past couple of years. But do you think that the populations of these countries are aligned with those priorities? Or do you think that the populations in these countries risk, expressing quite a degree of dissatisfaction with some of the destruction that we've seen not only in Gaza, but in Lebanon, in Syria, and now also in Iran?
Well, there's definite frustration and anger and deep-seated vitriol in these populations across the region, anger at what is happening, anger at Israel's treatment of the Palestinians broadly, anger at the horrors, the atrocities, the breaches of international law that we're seeing in Gaza, anger at Israeli attacks on Iran. That doesn't mean that this is in direct contravention of official positions. For example, in Saudi, we've seen vocal expressions from political elites that have condemned Israel's actions in Gaza, that have condemned Israel's actions against Iran. And I think that captures a lot of the public sentiment, a lot of the popular sentiment. People don't want war. They've seen the horrors of war. They've seen what happened in Syria, where over 500,000 people were killed and over 11 million people were displaced. They've seen what happened in Iraq with the horrors of the civil war, the US-led invasion, the rise of Daesh, and everything that came with that. And Iraq only just getting back on its feet now, albeit with serious corruption and political issues. They've seen the horrors of civil war in Lebanon, 15 years of civil war, the destruction of Beirut in 2006, the destruction of Beirut this year as well, and indeed last year. So the people of the region, they don't want to see this anymore. They want peace. They want to live their lives. They want to send their kids to school. They want to get access to medical care. They want to get access to an education. They want to get access to food. So none of this is in the interests of anyone other than those elites that are able to capitalize on war.
Professor Simon Mabon, thank you so very much for your expertise. That's unfortunately all we have time for.
Thank you.